Hi Stampers, it's Lisa. Welcome to today's live. Today we are doing our simple stamping, or stamping made simple, and we are making a bookmark pocket card. So this one opens up and then it has the bookmark that pops out of it. And then we are going to step it up a little bit and then add a technique, some die cutting, and some dry embossing to make this card, which is similar but not quite the same. We are using all the same designer series pack, but we're going to be switching up the patterns a little bit in the colors. So I hope you like what we make. So let's get down to the desk. So I'm playing around with one of the many new designer series papers that are in the new catalog. This particular designer series pack is called the Beautiful Gallery, and it has lots of beautiful, like, artistic patterns in it. I think I've shown it to you before. And then, of course, the backs are always pretty basic. And we are using Basic Beige. Now, that's a new color that came out last year with our new catalog, and not something that I used a lot. But we're going to be using it today. Basic Beige is what I used for the base here. So our card base, I don't know if I want to go this way or that way, but basically it's 5.5 by 11. Okay, and then I came over and I scored at 4.25, and then I scored at 8.5. So what that's going to do is it's going to give me this 2.5 section on the front. And we're going to fold it this way. So we're going to have a valley and then a mountain. Freezing on the screen. Really got to do something about this internet. Okay, and then I have some, this is Secret C. This is one of our new in colors. And it's just slightly different from our Night of Navy. I don't know if you can quite see that, but Night of Navy is a little brighter blue, whereas Secret C leans a little bit more towards black. So it's kind of in between. The light's hitting it just right, making me think this might be similar. So, I mean, those two would go well together. This is Misty Moonlight, but it's definitely darker than Misty Moonlight. I have two of those. So they are 4 by 5.25. And then to layer on top of the front, we are going to use this piece of designer series paper, and this is 3 3/4 by 5, and that's going to go on our front. And then on the inside, I'm going to be using another, 4 by 5.25 and a piece that is 3 3/4 by 5. This will be inside. And then I chose not to do a greeting on it yet, and I was just going to add a strip of the designer series paper for on the side. Okay. Then on the front of the card, I have, for this card, we're going to use a piece of designer series paper and a piece of the Secret C to mat underneath that, which obviously I forgot to cut, but we're going to need a piece that is going to be, because this is 2.5, we want 2 1/4. Yeah, we can do that. 2 1/4 by 5 1/4. And then it has an angle, and I decided that we're going to do the angle the easy way this time. Okay, so on our card base, I want to come down 2 inches over here. So I'm going to line this up with the 2 inch. And then I'm going to make a little tick mark, and then I'm going to cut from that score line down to that mark. And that's going to give me the pocket on the front that we're going to stick our bookmark into. Okay, but in order to put the designer series paper on the front and have it do the same angle, and I need that piece I just cut. Okay, so what I want it to do is to have these, 3 sides be even, and then I also want that much at the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually double it at the bottom. So I'm going to make what appears down here. And with that, actually, when it's flush like this, what we'll be able to do is kind of just butt it up to the top on this one. And I want it centered in here. Now I'm going to take a pair of scissors and I'm going to cut across here. So because it was doubled at the bottom, after I cut it and we bring it down, when we make it normal at the bottom, it'll have half of that at the top. Does that make sense? So when I had it up here, I had double the distance. Now I'm going to bring this back down, and now I have the single distance, but all the way around. Isn't that a whole lot easier? Okay, then I need my piece of designer series paper. And we're going to do the same thing with that. So I want to double it at the bottom, kind of making it flush with the top, where this would have been. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut this off at an angle, following the angle that's on the cardstock. So now when I bring this back down, we're going to have an even border all the way around. Okay, thank you to everyone who is liking and sharing the video. I'm having problems with the prize patrol. I used to be able to spin the wheel at the end, and so everybody who was watching could just kind of hang out and see if they won. But now, because I don't have that option anymore, I've been doing it the next video, and that doesn't seem to be working overly well. I've had several cards go unclaimed, and I've also had a few get lost in the mail. Might be because my fun fold cards are a little thicker than normal, and so they need to be hand canceled and all of that. So I have to think of something else to do, because it's getting expensive and it's not working as well as it used to. So what I'm thinking of doing is something along the lines where you'd still fill out the form, but then I would do a drawing from the form, but I haven't figured out completely what I want to do with that in order to make it work the best way. So thank you again for liking and sharing. I do appreciate that. It does get me seen. I do want to reward you for doing that. I just got to figure out what I'm going to be doing going forward. So now I'm just doing normal layering. And I'm going to put this on the front of my card as if the flap wasn't even there. Okay, I'm just going to center this here. So if I was doing a regular normal card, it would just look like that. But I have this additional piece that kind of folds over, but I want to create a pocket that I want the bookmark to be able to go down inside of. And so what I want to do to create that pocket is put some really strong adhesive along the bottom and along this side. Now we want to be careful that we're not putting it across here. We want to leave this top section open because that's going to be the opening to our pocket. And then to make sure that that sticks really well, I'm just going to come back in here. I'm just going to burnish where that adhesive is, make sure that's good and stuck. For our inside, I'm using white on this one because the centers of the flowers are white. When I looked at using very vanilla, I don't know, it just didn't seem to go as well as the white does. So we'll use white. I'm going to just put this down one side. Then we can go ahead and mount it on the Secret C and put it on the inside of our card. Okay, so we're almost there. We're going to do that part. And now I have the bookmark itself. So this is 1 3/4 by 10, scored at 5. And then we are adhering this piece to the top, which is 1 1/2. It should be by 4 3/4. I think I need to shrink this a little. Yep. But better to have to shrink than cutting it too short, right? Okay, now I wanted to put the ribbon at the top, and I want to put that through a hole, but I want to make sure the hole is centered. So once again, I'm coming back to my grid paper here. I don't know if you can see that, probably not. Okay. And I'm looking at my 0 at the top, and I'm just kind of eyeballing that that's, you know, centered, and then I'm going to come down a little bit. So I want my hole to be punched down a ways from the top, but definitely in the center. So then I'm going to use my 1/8 inch hole punch. Hopefully you have one of those. If you don't, you can also use the pointy end of the Take Your Pick tool, because that is 1/8 inch when it's all the way through. Okay, and now you're wondering, how am I going to get this wide ribbon through that little tiny hole? Well, I have a trick, and I saved the packaging because I saw this from another demo that said she was using floss threaders, and I wasn't sure what she was talking about. And when I saw threaders, I was over in the sewing department, and that is definitely not where they are. They were in the area with the dental care. I guess this would be if you were wearing braces and stuff that you needed to thread the dental floss in there, but we're going to use it for our bookmark. So I'm going to just stick the ends of this is about 6 inches, and I'm going to stick the open ends through there, and then I'm just going to pull on the thread, and that's going to pull it all the way through. So isn't that slick? It's kind of like a needle threader, but bigger. Okay, and now I need to pull this through the loop of my ribbon. So that's where I'm going to take my tweezers, and I'm just going to grab hold of it and pull it through like that. You might be able to just pull it on your own. I had issues, and so I thought since I found a solution for my issue, I would show it to you in case you had something similar. Oops. Okay. It's starting to fray a little bit, and when ribbon starts to fray, what I do is I take one of these little mini lighters and then just kind of gently touch the flame, and it melts it, I guess, at the end, and puts like a little bit of melted plastic or wax, something on the edge, so that they will no longer go through there. Okay, so now that fits perfectly in my little hole for my little pocket there. Now we just need the sentiment. And so I'm going to bring in some very vanilla. Oh, I need white. Bring in some white. And I was playing around with the thumping technique that we're going to use on card number 2. And this was straight strength, and this was the bottom piece was tapped off. I'll show you that in a minute, but that's what those are. I was experimenting on how I was going to show you to do the next part. So I'm going to take this sentiment and I'm going to stamp it on a scrap of paper, and then I'm going to use the heartfelt hexagon. Oh, I might need a wider paper. Yep, I'm going to need a wider paper. Okay. I'm digging through my scraps over here. In my drawer over here, I have hanging files, and then in each hanging file, this is Whisper White, and so there is the manila folder with my loose pieces, and then my full pack, and then I have these little Pendaflex folders. They're job ticket items, I guess. Number 99849 by Pendaflex, and they are on my website under those other products I recommend. So if you're looking to get organized, I have several things over there for organizing, plus little goodies that I use that Stampin' Up! Does not sell, such as my ruler and the mini magnets, all those things that I use that Stampin' Up! Doesn't have. So you might want to check out my website for the craft room favorites under the shop tab. And it will throw you over to, if you're looking for the glue gun or for, something by My Sweet Petunia, it'll throw you there. And then a lot of them just are Amazon links. And by using the Amazon link, I get a little thank you from them, kind of as a referral fee. It doesn't cost you any extra, but it does give me a little thank you. So it helps me stay in business, which lately has been challenging. Looks like I haven't lost anybody yet. Okay, so I went ahead and I punched a second one. Now I happened to have a piece that was big enough so that I could punch the entire thing. But if this, for say, was not enough, I could come in and just punch off a portion. And punch off a portion. So I could have done this with, you know, a 1-inch strip or a 3/4 inch strip and gotten my pieces that way. Or I can take this one I punched out whole and just cut that down the middle. Because all we want to do is use this for a backing to make it pop just a little bit. Because if I put that on there all by itself, I mean, it works, but it just looks much nicer having the edge on it. And again, I'm using the liquid glue for the wiggle time so that I can move it around and see that I'm, you know, perfectly centered and I've got the same amount of color sticking up from the top as I do from the bottom. And this one has nice straight sides to it, and so this one doesn't really require more stuff. But if you were working on a shape where you wanted it to come out on all sides, then we would come back with this and then have this stick out the side. Okay, so it's the same thing. It would be cutting the shape down the middle and having it pop out the sides. But I'm not using the sides, I'm just using that part, and I'm going to pop it up on dimensionals to give it a little extra something. And then we could, of course, add some embellishments. And I'm just centering mine over the seam right here. The other thing you could do is center it in the card overall. But I liked it that way. A few pearls. And I'm doing 5 because I just want to randomly position them around and I want them in an odd number. So there is card number 1. That is our simple stamping because it does not require any die cutting, any embossing, anything fancy. But if you want to step that up a little bit, we can get fancy, as I did in this card here. So same idea in that I started with the same card base. So this is 5.5 by 11, and this one is scored at 2.5, 6 3/4. But basically, when I set it in the thing, I scored it at 4 1/4 because that's what a normal size card is, and then I did 4 1/4 more, so that would match. And then I just by default ended up with the 2.5 inches on the end because that was just the leftover. So that defaulted our pocket size to the 2.5. And then I went ahead and I put it into one of our dry embossing folders and then ran that through the Big Shot. Where is it? For that, I used this birch one. And these are really big. I don't know if you've gotten any of our newer embossing folders, but they have upped the size quite a bit. Can't quite put my fingers on a regular size one, but they were smaller than this because they were narrower. And they made it wider so we could do a whole card front. But now they have done it where you can do the whole front and back of a standard size card. So it'll do a whole 8.5 by 5.5 in one folder. But I just stuck it in like this. And then I ran it through the machine this way. I did have to be careful to use a kind of newer plate on the top so that it didn't give any dented impression in this. But that did it. And if you have one of the electric machines, the Sizzix Big Kick, the one that takes the 8.5 by 11 plate that goes through it, you could even leave it all the way flat like this and run it through. And you can, well, this isn't the right one because you know you need a different sandwich for dry embossing. But if you have our standard base plate, standard 2, clear plates, it will fit through the Big Kick this way. So you can feed it through the machine and it just goes a little faster than putting the whole great big machine, the plates in there. Because the ones that come with that are huge. So they are wonderful in the fact that I can cut a whole lot of things all at once, but it takes a little longer to feed through there. So putting this other one in sideways just makes it take half the time. And again, this electric machine is on my website as a product I recommend. They're a little on the pricey side, but with my arthritis, it was very helpful. And because I do so much of it. Oh yes, can't get through a stamping session without a little bit of extra ink, right? I just have to make sure I'm not going to end up with that on my card itself. Okay, so I had the base. I showed you where I dry embossed it, and then I have the same kind of layers. I have the 2 that are going to be front and inside that are 4 by 5 1/4. Inside I have the very vanilla, and that's going to be 3 3/4 by 5, and then my 3 3/4 by 5 designer series paper for the front, our little 1/2 inch strip for inside, then the bookmark being 10 by 1 3/4 scored at 5, and this is 1 1/2 by 4 3/4. Like I said, we're going to put this together and then we're going to work on this die cutting flower and the thumping technique that I used to make that flower multiple colors. I should have probably done this the other way and done the flower on this one and done the different designer series paper on this one, but I didn't, so we'll see how it goes. You'll get the idea on how it's done, and then you can decide. Maybe there's something other than a flower that you put up there in the corner, since this is more of a scenery piece. And then because this is dry embossed instead of having layers, then there is no need to cut the layers to fit. That little trick with the angle isn't needed for this card. All we're going to need to do is measure down 2 inches and cut the first. And again, I can set this in my trimmer and I can mark the 2 inches or I can use my grid paper. I just need to make a little tick mark 2 inches down from the top. And then we're going to cut from that to the first score line to create our pocket. But this is really pretty paper, and it reminds me of the other ones we've had, the Meandering Meadow and the Thoughtful Journey. There's been several of them that have had scenery in them. This is just, I don't know, a more sophisticated scenery, I guess I want to say, in the beautiful gallery. Designer Series paper stack. And I do have Monday's card. We are doing another fun fold card. This time I watched a video in French. It was one of the artisan design team members, and she made a swing card that I thought was really cool. I liked it. She did it in a like 4x9, so it will fit into a business size envelope, you know, kind of like our slimline cards do. So that there will be that size, and then I made it into an A2 as well. So you'll have your choice of whether or not you want it to be a larger slimline or a standard A2. And I can show you those as soon as we are done putting this one together. So I know we call this our simple stamping, or stamping made simple, but I'm hoping that those of you who have done some stamping for a while still pick up a few little tips and tricks. I've just had several questions from beginners that needed to get to the point where they could do the Monday cards. Okay, so once again, I'm going to bring in my little floss threader, and I'm going to put the open end in there because I want to be able to take my threader off. The first time I fed it through, I put it in this end and it was stuck, and so I couldn't pull the threader out. I suppose I could have cut it, but it wouldn't come out unless I pulled the thread all the way through, and then that was like doing away with the point of why I used it in the first place. So again, I'm going to use my tweezers to reach through here and grab that. Get that on a tug. And I'm just using paper snips. I would recommend, if you do ribbon cutting and you do paper cutting, that you have a separate set of snips. One for ribbon, you could maybe tie a piece of ribbon around the handle, and then one for paper, because it will dull towards the other. You know, like if you use it on ribbon, it's going to be dull on paper, and if you use it on paper, it's going to be dull on ribbon. So your scissors will last you longer if you use them only on one medium. So there is that one. Now we're going to do our sentiment. And I'm using crumb cake for the sentiment. We do have a basic beige, a basic beige ink pad, but I don't know, it's a little on the green side. Now I'm told if we let it sit for a while, like we walked away from it and came back to it tomorrow it would be more beige than it is now. Maybe there are some green undertones in the basic beige, because I mean it kind of matches. What do you think? Does the lighter work on the cotton ribbon? Yeah, I think it does, because this feels kind of cottony. I've definitely used on most of the ribbon in my drawer. I had to be a little bit careful with the ones with the metallic because they, I don't want to say sparked, but the metallic burned a little differently. And I tend to bounce back and forth between whether or not I stamp first or punch first. I know some people are very particular as to whether they would punch the shape first and then stamp into it, or stamp it and then punch it out. I think you just do whatever you feel comfortable with. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do it. Do what you prefer doing. That's the fun of crafting, right? I get so bugged when people tell me, or tell another person that they have done something the wrong way. Because in crafting, there is no wrong way. That's why it's called crafting, because we're being creative, right? So I never did understand that. Okay, so see, that's how I was able to get two pieces out of a narrower strip. I guess it looks more green because it's up against a green. So either one works. Oh, probably should have done it on Very Vanilla though. So let's try that again. You'll notice I keep my stamp pads out in front of me. I tend to prefer doing it that way, and I'm less likely to stick my fingers in it, although I still did. But if it was over here, I would have stuck my entire arm into it, I can almost guarantee. Also, because we are getting new colors, and we get new ink pads with new colors, or you would get a new ink pad in the new color, is a good time to remind you that there are stickers on the back side with the names of the colors. I always put one on the front here, and then I put the solid one inside. And then you want to make sure that you peel off the rest of the stickers from the back and throw them away, because there are little feet. I don't know if you noticed, but there's little feet in one and little divots in another. So if you stack them one on top of each other, those match up and they keep it from sliding. Like you can't slide them when they're together like that. But having those stickers on the back side, I don't know why, but it's like just enough thickness that that doesn't work. It's very strange. And then you also want to take chapstick or a birthday candle or something that would be kind of a lubricant, and then run that down the tracks and then go back and forth like this, because new pads will be very stiff, and they're stiff on purpose because we want them to be airtight. We don't want the ink to dry out. And so they need to be tight, but lubricating these with wax of some kind will make them open and close a lot easier. And you'll also notice that they store upside down. When you flip them, it makes the pad upside down. So when the ink pools on the bottom, it's actually on the top of the pad. So that's designed that way on purpose. So just a few tips about our pads. That made me lose my little pieces. I did have the two of them, I swear. There's the other one. That's another thing. If you have a tendency to squeeze too hard on the bottle and too much comes out, then just dotting, just tap, 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 will have less glue come out. And if you need to spread it around, this would be good for that. Either gluing a larger area or smoothing out where you did too much. So again, I'm kind of sliding it around, making sure we're even on the two sides, getting just the right amount of color off the top and bottom. And then we're ready to adhere it to the front, and then we can move on to our die cutting and the thumping technique. So I hope I haven't bored you to tears and you are learning something from this. I just wanted to be sure that those who were beginners got some good information, and those who wanted to step it up also got some good information. Okay, so now I'm ready to do the die cutting and the thumping. So I want to bring in some very vanilla, and the flower might not be right in there. What else I could do up there? If I had the little plane or something, that would be good. I'm not sure. I'll have to play around. But in order to get this technique, I wanted to show you how that's done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a stamp that is kind of a solid image. So we're getting a lot of surface area. And then we're going to ink up as we normally would, just by tapping on our ink pad. But then I'm going to bring in some markers. Now these are our Stampin' Write markers, and so they are different than our Stampin' Blends. The Stampin' Blends are an alcohol-based marker. These are water-based ink, so they are similar to the ink that is in the pads. It used to be that we could use the re-inkers to re-ink the markers and the pads, but they have told us now not to do that. I'm not really clear on why, but the ink formulation is different, and I think it's because there is an anti-foaming agent that they have to put in it for the firm foam. So that is probably the difference, but we used to be able to re-ink them. So if you have our old ones, what you would do is take tweezers and pull this out, and then you would put a few drops of the ink down inside. But as I said, they said not to do that, but I'm not sure why. I know that sounds bad. Just remember hearing it, and I hear a lot of demos still telling people that they can re-ink them. I don't know if it does any damage. I just know they said not to, so it wouldn't be guaranteed. I guess it would be up to you if you wanted to do it and it did or didn't do something to your markers. We would be, it'd be your own. They wouldn't allow you to file it under warranty. Is that making sense? Okay, so I just used Secret C, Basic Black, and Basic Gray. Okay, and I just kind of tapped on the side. I used the brush tip end, and I just kind of let it wobble in my hand and tap up and down on that. And then you would huff on it and then stamp it down onto your paper. because the huffing on it re-wets the ink. Okay, now if you wanted those colors to stand up, you know, or stand out a little more, you could ink up your stamp off, and then come in with your markers. And again, you're just kind of letting it thump. That's why they call it the thumping technique, because you're just kind of hitting it with the end. You don't want to smash the point. You want to hit it with kind of the side of the tip. This works great for like birds' nests or trees or something that you want to have some different shades to it. See that? This is with full strength ink, and these two are with stamping it off just a little bit. So this is a little more striking, I guess, than this is. And it's going to depend on the colors you use. I mean, if you were to use Daffodil Delight, it probably wouldn't matter, you know, what color you thumped on top of it. It's going to show up. But because my Misty Moonlight was kind of a darker color, that's why I was showing you the difference on stamping off. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you wanted to add a little something, to the leaves, is you could run a piece of packing tape like over the top of it and then die cut it after that. So the leaves, rather than being flat like this, they would be shiny. So that is something I was playing with this weekend, because I was playing around with the card I'm doing for next month's customer appreciation PDF. If you place an order with me, you get a set of PDFs of instructional things, and one of them is going to be this. And it has a patent leather feel to those notes and totes, and that's done with the packing tape. So if you want the directions for that and 6 more awesome cards, then place an order with me next month and you get that. If you place an order this month, you get the Cheers and Sips bundle of tutorials. Oh, I was going to show you Monday's card before I forget that. Okay. As I said, she did it in kind of a slimline card. And so hers was like this. And it's pretty big. And so I'll still do one of those, but I wanted to shrink it down into an A2. And so this fits into a standard envelope. And this is what we will be doing on Monday. So thank you for being here. I hope you loved today's cards, that you give this pocket bookmark card a try, and let me know how it goes. Okay. Again, so thank you for being here. I appreciate you hanging out with me and shopping my online store. We all know that things are rough nowadays, so I want you to use the supplies you have on hand, but if you do need to stock up, I appreciate you shopping with me. I'd love the chance to earn your business. So I will see you on Monday. Thank you so much. Bye.